The north is cold and full of whispers.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. Jon Snow's eyes snapped open in the darkness of the old windmill tower at Queen's Crown. His breath came in ragged gasps, sweat soaking through his furs despite the cold northern night. Beside him, Ygritte stirred but didn't wake. Ghost lifted his massive white head from where he lay at Jon's feet, red eyes gleaming in the moonlight filtering through the broken stones. The vision still burned behind Jon's eyes, not a dream, something deeper, something that felt more real than the tower around him, more visceral than any waking moment he'd ever experienced. He'd seen through other eyes, felt through other hearts, lived through deaths that hadn't happened yet. Through Catelyn Stark's eyes, he'd watched musicians in a great hall play the Rains of Castamere. He'd felt her maternal instincts scream warning as she noticed chainmail peeking from beneath Rose Bolton's sleeve. He'd experienced her horror as crossbowmen revealed themselves in the galleries above, as the doors slammed shut, as the trap closed around her son. Through Robb's eyes, he'd seen Talisa, his wife, his queen, clutching her swollen belly as Walder Frey stepped forward with a dagger. Jon had felt Robb's disbelief as the blade plunged into Talisa's stomach once, twice, 3 times. 4 times, targeting the unborn child with brutal precision. He'd experienced Robb's attempt to stand, to reach her, as crossbow bolts punched through his body. He'd felt the numbness, the confusion, the dreamlike unreality of dying. Through Grey Wind's eyes, and this was what confirmed it as more than nightmare, he'd sensed the direwolf's rage and terror from inside a pen, trapped away from his master. 4 crossbowmen with cold eyes and steady hands, bolts slamming into fur and flesh, the wolf's consciousness fading as Robb's faded, connected across the distance. And through Catelyn's eyes again at the end, Jon had experienced something worse than death. He'd felt her watch Robb's throat being cut. Felt her own scream, not of sound, but of absolute emptiness. A void where a mother's love had been carved out and replaced with nothing. He'd felt hands grab her hair, felt the blade against her throat, felt her not fighting because there was nothing left inside her worth preserving. Then he'd felt her die. Jon's hands trembled as he pushed himself upright. The green dream, for that's what it must have been, what else could it be, hadn't shown him possibilities. It had shown him certainties, events that would unfold with the inevitability of seasons changing. Robb was going to die. The entire Northern Army's leadership would be butchered at a wedding feast, and the war would be lost. Unless Jon stopped it. Jon? Ygritte's voice was thick with sleep. What's wrong? I have to go. Jon was already moving, gathering his sword, his cloak, checking that Longclaw hung properly at his hip. Go where? It's the middle of the night. South. I have to ride south. Ygritte sat up fully now, her wild red hair catching the moonlight. South? Jon, you're with us now. You swore. My family is going to die. Jon's voice cracked. My brother. The woman who raised me. They're walking into a trap, and I'm the only one who knows. You had a dream. Ygritte's tone shifted from confusion to concern. Jon, it was just... I felt them die. I felt my brother's heart stop. I felt my moth. I felt Catelyn's throat being cut. I was there. What's all this shouting about? Jon faced him, one hand on Longclaw's hilt. I'm leaving. Don't try to stop me. Tormund's expression hardened. You're one of us now, boy. You don't just walk away from the free folk. I'm not walking. I'm riding. Jon pushed past him toward the stairs. Ghost followed, a silent white shadow. Jon, Ygritte's voice followed him down. If you go back to them, they'll kill you. You're a deserter from the Night's Watch. Your own people will put a noose around your neck. Jon paused on the stairs, looking back at her. In the dim light, she looked so young, so fierce, so alive. Part of him wanted to stay, to forget the vision, to pretend he'd never seen what was coming. But he could still feel Robb's confusion as Roose Bolton's blade entered his heart. Could still hear the words the Leech Lord would speak, the Lannisters send their regards. Then I die, Jon said quietly. But I won't let them die without trying to save them. The wildling camp spread out below in the darkness. Nearly 200 fighters loyal to Mance Rayder, sleeping around dying fires. Jon moved quickly to where the horses were picketed. His mare was a sturdy northern breed, stolen from a farm weeks ago. She snorted as he approached, sensing his urgency. Jon heard footsteps behind him and spun, hand on his sword. But it was only Ygritte, her bow slung over her shoulder, her face set with determination. "I'm not stopping you," she said. "But Jon, you're making a mistake. You're a crow. You broke your vows." "I know what I am." Jon swung himself into the saddle. Ghost pressed against the horse's flank, ready to run. "And I know what I have to do. You'll die for nothing, but it's my choice to make." He kicked the horse into motion before she could respond, before Tormund could organize pursuit, before any of the wildlings could raise an alarm. Ghost loped ahead, white fur gleaming in the starlight, leading the way south through the darkness. The first 2 days blurred together in Jon's memory afterward. He rode at a pace that would kill the horse. He knew it, accepted it, pushed harder anyway. The mare's flanks were foaming, her breath coming in desperate gasps. But Jon couldn't slow down. Every moment he wasted was a moment closer to the Red Wedding. Every rest stop was time Robb didn't have. The vision had shown him details, but not dates. He didn't know when the wedding would happen, only that it would. Days from now? Weeks. He had to assume the worst, had to ride as if every second mattered. On the second day, as the sun climbed toward noon, the horse collapsed mid-gallop. Jon felt her legs give out beneath him, had just enough time to kick free of the stirrups before he hit the ground hard. He rolled, came up with his shoulder screaming pain, and looked back to see the mare on her side, chest heaving, eyes rolling white. She wouldn't get up again. Jon knew horses well enough to recognize when one was finished. He'd killed her with his desperate pace, and he felt a stab of guilt even as he knew he'd do it again. One horse's life weighed against Robb's, against Catelyn's, against the entire northern cause. "We keep moving," he told Ghost, already scanning the landscape. They were somewhere south of Queen's Crown, still in the Gift, the lands that stretched between the Wall and the Neck. Farmland, mostly, worked by people who owed fealty to the Night's Watch. In the distance, perhaps 100 yards off the road, Jon spotted a small farmstead. Smoke rose from the chimney, and in the paddock beside the house, a horse grazed. Jon didn't let himself think about what he was about to do. He ran toward the farm, Ghost at his heels. A man emerged from the house, middle-aged, weathered face, the look of someone who'd worked this land his whole life. He saw Jon approaching and his hand went to a hatchet at his belt. "Who are you? What do you want? I need your horse." Jon didn't slow his approach. "The horse ain't for sale." "I'm not buying it." Jon reached the paddock fence, vaulted over it. The farmer's horse, a gelding not as strong as the mare but fresh, shied away from him. "You can't just take my horse. That's theft." The farmer moved to block him, hatchet raised. Jon drew Longclaw. The Valyrian steel blade caught the sunlight, ripples of light running along the metal. The farmer's eyes widened and he stepped back. "I'm sorry." Jon meant it, but my family is dying and this horse is the only way I can reach them in time. I'll send payment when I can. I swear it on my honor. "Your honor?" The farmer spat. "You're a thief." The farmer threw the hatchet. It spun through the air and Jon jerked aside, feeling it graze his shoulder. Then he was kicking the gelding into motion, racing away from the farm with Ghost running alongside. Behind him, the farmer's curses faded into the distance. Jon hunched low over the horse's neck, Longclaw sheathed across his back, and urged the animal faster. South. He had to go south. By the third day, Jon had entered the Neck. The landscape transformed around him. The solid ground of the Gift gave way to bogs and marshes, to waterways that shifted course with the seasons, to a vast wetland that had swallowed armies over the centuries. The King's Road ran through here somewhere, a raised causeway built by the first men, but Jon had lost it in his desperate southward push. The gelding struggled in the soft ground. Where before Jon had ridden at full gallop, now he was reduced to a careful walk, picking his way between stands of trees that rose from dark water, avoiding pools that might be ankle-deep or might swallow a horse whole. Ghost ranged ahead, testing the ground with his massive paws, finding paths that would support their weight. Jon's fever had started that morning. The wound on his shoulder from the farmer's hatchet, barely a graze he'd thought, had festered. Or perhaps it was exhaustion catching up with him. Or the green dream itself, burning through his mind like wildfire. His hands shook on the reins. His vision blurred at the edges. He could feel himself slipping toward delirium, could feel the boundary between the vision and reality beginning to dissolve. He saw Robb's face, not the Robb he'd left at Winterfell months ago, but the Robb from the vision, a king, wearing a crown, older and harder than Jon remembered. He watched Talisa die again, felt Robb's anguish, felt the crossbow bolts punching through his brother's body. "I'm coming," Jon whispered to the ghost of his brother. "I'm coming, Robb. Just hold on. The gelding took another step into the marsh, and its foreleg plunged deep into mud. The horse screamed, tried to pull free, but the bog had it. Jon barely managed to throw himself clear before the animal went down, thrashing, sinking. He landed in waist-deep water, the cold shocking him back to clarity for a moment. Ghost was there immediately, and Jon grabbed the direwolf's fur, let Ghost pull him toward more solid ground. Behind them, the gelding's screams cut off as the marsh claimed it. Jon dragged himself onto a hummock of relatively dry ground and collapsed. He'd lost both horses now. He was in the middle of the neck with no mount, no guide, running a fever, and the vision of the red wedding still burning in his mind. He tried to stand and his legs wouldn't support him. Tried to call out and his voice came as barely a whisper. Ghost's howl split the marsh air, a sound of pure wildness that echoed across the waterways. Once, twice, 3 times the direwolf called, and Jon understood dimly that Ghost was summoning help in the only way he knew how. Jon's consciousness began to slip. He saw Catelyn's face as her throat was cut, saw Robb reaching for Talisa with hands that would never touch her again, saw the twins' great hall running red with northern blood. The Lannisters send their regards. Roose Bolton's voice echoed in Jon's fevered mind. Those 5 words, so simple, so devastating. The phrase that would announce Robb's murder, that would signal the end of the Northern Rebellion, that would haunt Jon through death and beyond if he failed to prevent it. Figures emerged from the mist of the marsh, small people, smaller than Jon even seated, with nets and frog spears. Cranogmen. Jon had heard tales of them all his life, the elusive marsh dwellers who served House Reed, but he'd never seen one until now. One of them approached, studied Jon with sharp eyes. "That's a stark wolf," the man said in the common tongue. His voice was higher pitched than Jon expected, musical almost. Another Cranog man, a woman, moved closer to examine Jon's face. "And that's a stark face. Look at the eyes, the hair." "He's dying," said a third. "We should take him to Lord Reed." "Greywater Watch," Jon managed to force out. "I need to reach Greywater Watch." The first Cranogman's eyebrows rose. "You know of Greywater Watch. Who are you, Stark boy?" "Jon Snow. Need to see Howland Reed. Must warn my brother." His words dissolved into delirium. He felt hands on him, lifting him. Felt himself being placed on some kind of litter. Through the fever, he heard the Cranogmen speaking in their own language. Quick, liquid syllables he couldn't follow. Ghost walked beside the litter, and that was Jon's last clear memory before darkness claimed him entirely. He dreamed of the red wedding again and again and again, each time more vivid, more real, more terrible. He lived through Catelyn's realization of the trap, lived through Robb's futile attempt to protect Talisa, lived through Grey Wind's rage and helplessness, lived through deaths that hadn't happened yet but felt more certain than sunrise. When Jon finally woke, he was lying on a soft cot in a room he didn't recognize. The walls were wood, but they seemed to move slightly, to sway with a rhythm like breathing. Candles burned in sconces, their light warm and steady. Ghost lay at the foot of the cot, and at the sight of Jon's eyes opening, the direwolf's tail thumped once against the floor. A man sat in a chair beside the cot, small like all Cranogmen, but with a presence that filled the space. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp and knowing. He wore simple clothes but carried himself with quiet authority. "You're awake," the man said. "Good. We need to talk." Jon tried to sit up and managed it on the second attempt. His shoulder had been bandaged. The fever had broken. He felt weak but clear-headed for the first time in days. "Where am I?" Jon's mind sharpened immediately. Howland Reed, his father's, Ned's closest friend. The man who'd saved Ned's life at the Tower of Joy. The only other survivor of that legendary battle, besides Ned himself. "Lord Reed, I need to continue south. My brother Robb is in danger. There's going to be a massacre at a wedding feast, I know." Howland raised a hand to forestall Jon's shock. "You told me, in your fever. You described the red wedding in quite vivid detail. You understand why I have to reach him. I have to warn him before Walder Frey and Rose Bolton betray him at the wedding, before they murder him and Lady Catelyn and the entire Northern leadership." "Yes, Jon, I understand." Howland leaned forward. "What I don't understand is how you know. You spoke of a green dream, of seeing through others' eyes, of living through deaths that haven't occurred. I don't know how I know." Jon met his eyes. "I just know it's real. I felt it. The vision was more real than anything I've ever experienced. The old magic Howland nodded slowly. The green seers of the children of the forest could see past and future, could inhabit the minds of beasts and sometimes men. The Starks have always had a touch of that gift, passed down through the centuries. Usually it manifests as warging, bonding with an animal. He glanced at Ghost, but sometimes in times of great need, it goes deeper, shows more. I don't care what it was. I only care about stopping it. And you will. You've already changed the future by coming here, Jon Snow. Howland's expression grew serious, but there are things you need to know before you continue. Things about yourself that will change everything. Jon felt a chill despite the warm room. What do you mean? You asked to see me specifically. In your fever, you kept saying you needed to reach Howland Reed. Why? What do you know of me? You're my father's friend. You fought beside him at the Tower of Joy. The Tower of Joy, Howland repeated the words softly. Yes, I was there when your father made the promise that has defined his life for 17 years. What promise? Howland stood, walked to the window. Outside, Jon could see the marsh stretching away into mist. Your father, Eddard Stark, is the most honorable man I have ever known. He values truth above comfort, duty above desire, which is why what he did for you is so remarkable. What are you talking about? Howland turned back to face him. Jon, your mother was not some tavern wench Ned bedded during the war. Your mother was Lyanna Stark, Ned's sister. The words hung in the air. Jon stared at Howland, unable to process what he'd just heard. That's impossible. I was there when she died, in a tower in Dorne, in a bed of blood, with a newborn baby in her arms. You, Howland's voice was gentle but unyielding. Lyanna died giving birth to you, and with her last breath she made Ned promise to protect you, to hide you, to keep you safe from Robert Baratheon, who would have killed you for the crime of being born. But if Lyanna was my mother, then who? Jon's voice trailed off as the implication hit him like a physical blow. Your father was Rhaegar Targaryen, Prince of Dragonstone, heir to the Iron Throne. Howland let that sink in before continuing. Lyanna loved him. They married in secret. When she became pregnant, Rhaegar hid her away to protect her from his father's madness. But Robert's rebellion came, and Rhaegar died at the Trident, and Lyanna died in childbirth. And Ned was left with a choice: tell the truth and watch Robert murder his sister's son, or lie and claim you as his bastard. He chose to lie. Jon's voice was barely a whisper. He let everyone think he betrayed Catelyn. Let her hate me. Let me grow up a bastard. He broke his honor for you, Jon. The most honorable man in Westeros lied for 17 years to keep you alive. Howland moved closer, and now you're riding south to save your brother. Except Robb isn't your brother. He's your cousin. And you're not Jon Snow, bastard of Winterfell. You're Jon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, with a claim to the Iron Throne that supersedes every living person in the Seven Kingdoms. Everything he'd thought he knew about himself, about his place in the world, dissolved. The bastard, the outsider. The one who didn't belong. All of it had been a lie. A necessary lie, perhaps, but still a lie. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're about to throw your life away for people you think are your family, without knowing the truth of who you are. Howland sat back down. If you go to Robb and warn him about the Red Wedding, what happens next? Even if he believes you, even if you save him, what then? You're still a deserter from the Night's Watch. You have no future except a noose or the wall. I care about saving them anymore, is it? Howland leaned forward intently. You saw something in that green dream. Something beyond the Red Wedding. You felt the White Walkers coming, didn't you? Felt the threat from beyond the wall? Jon had felt it. In the vision, buried beneath the immediate horror of the massacre, there had been something else. A cold that had nothing to do with winter. A darkness that made the Lannister-Stark war seem like children squabbling while monsters gathered at the door. The dead are coming, Jon said. The White Walkers, the long night, it's all real, and nobody is prepared. And to fight that threat, the Seven Kingdoms need to be united. Need a leader who understands what's coming and has the legitimacy to rally everyone. Howland's eyes bored into Jon's. They need a king, not Robb Stark, king in the north, fighting a losing war against the Lannisters. Not whoever sits the Iron Throne in King's Landing. They need someone who can unite both sides, someone with Stark blood and Targaryen blood. Someone who's seen the real enemy. You're saying I should claim the throne. I'm saying you should know who you are before you decide what to do. Your mission isn't just to save Robb anymore. It's to save the realm. And you can't do that as a bastard deserter. You need allies. You need legitimacy. You need Robb alive, yes, but you also need him to understand what you are and what's at stake. Howland reached into his robes and pulled out a small bundle. He unwrapped it to reveal a beautiful silver harp, old and worn but still gleaming. Rhaegar's harp, your father's. Lyanna kept it with her at the Tower of Joy. I've kept it safe all these years. He handed it to Jon. Show this to Robb. Tell him where it came from. And these? He produced a stack of letters, tied with ribbon. Letters Ned wrote to me over the years. He never mentioned you by name, but he talks about a promise to his sister. Read between the lines and the truth is clear, evidence that could change everything. I'm also sending 200 Crannog men with you, Howland continued. Fighters and scouts who know the Neck and the Riverlands better than any living men. They'll get you to Robb's camp safely and quickly. We've already lost 3 days while you recovered. We can make up some of that time. The Crannog men know secret paths through the marsh that will shave days off the normal route. 3 days? Jon's chest tightened. How long until the wedding? I don't know. But your fever dream seemed to suggest it's soon. We need to move fast. Howland stood. Get your strength back today. Eat. Rest. Tomorrow before dawn, you ride for the Riverlands with an army at your back and the truth of your heritage in your hands. And Jon, when you reach Robb, tell him everything. The green dream, the red wedding, and who you really are. He needs to know all of it. Jon spent that day eating ravenously, sleeping deeply, and trying to come to terms with Howland's revelation. He was a Targaryen, the son of Rhaegar, the prince who'd supposedly kidnapped Lyanna and started Robert's rebellion. Except it hadn't been kidnapping, it had been love. A secret marriage, a hidden pregnancy. That night, Jon sat with Ghost and read through Ned's letters to Howland by candlelight. They were sparse, careful, written in Ned's measured hand, but Howland was right. Read with knowledge of the truth, the meaning was clear. The boy grows stronger each day, he has his mother's spirit. Some nights I wonder if I did right, keeping silent. But I made a promise, and I will honor it until my last breath. Robert asked about the mother again. I hate lying to my oldest friend, but some lies are necessary to protect the innocent. Had endured Catelyn's coldness, Robert's crude jokes about the mother, the stigma of being thought unfaithful, all to protect Jon, all to honor a promise to his dying sister. And now Jon was about to reveal that secret, about to tell Robb that his bastard brother was actually his cousin and the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms, about to upend everything. But first, he had to save Robb's life. Before dawn the next morning, Jon stood in the courtyard of Greywater Watch, a castle that seemed to float on the marsh itself, its foundations shifting and adapting to the waterways. 200 Crannog men assembled before him, small figures in leather and scales, carrying frog spears and nets and bows. They looked like they'd stepped out of legend, and perhaps they had. Howland stood beside Jon. These are my best warriors. They'll follow you to the Riverlands and beyond if needed. Their captain is Jojen Reed, my son. I've had dreams of you, Jon Snow. Dreams of a white wolf and a 3-headed dragon. You're important to what's coming. We're all important, Jon said. Or none of us are. Howland handed Jon the reins to a fresh horse, a mare bred for the marsh, sure-footed and strong. Ride fast, ride south. And Jon, remember what I told you. You're not just saving your family, you're saving the realm. Don't forget that when things get difficult. Jon swung into the saddle. Ghost stood ready beside the horse. The Crannog men moved with uncanny efficiency, mounting small horses or preparing to travel on foot through paths only they could see. One more thing, Howland said. When you tell Robb about the Red Wedding, about the trap waiting at the Twins, tell him this: the Lannisters send their regards. Those are the words Roose Bolton will speak when he stabs Robb. 5 words that haven't been said yet. When you speak them, Robb will know your vision is true. Jon nodded, committing the phrase to memory. The Lannisters send their regards. 5 words to prove the impossible. Then he kicked his horse into motion and led 200 Crannog men south toward his brother's camp, toward a wedding that would become a massacre, toward a destiny he'd never imagined. The journey from Greywater Watch to the Riverlands took 3 days, though by normal routes it should have taken 6 or more. The Crannog men guided Jon through hidden paths, ancient causeways built by the first men and maintained in secret for thousands of years. Where the marsh would have swallowed a lone rider, the Cranogmen found solid ground. Where the waterways blocked progress, they knew fords and crossings invisible to anyone else. Jon rode with Jojen Reed much of the time. The boy spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. "I've seen you in my dreams," Jojen said on the second day, "standing on a wall of ice, fighting shadows. And I've seen you in a throne room, wearing a crown of iron and ice together. The visions aren't clear about which future comes to pass." "Maybe neither," Jon said. "Maybe I die at the Twins trying to stop the Red Wedding. You won't die there. That much I know." Jojen's green eyes were certain. "You have a longer path to walk." They pushed hard, stopping only when absolutely necessary. The Cranogmen could move through the marsh at night as easily as day, and they used that advantage, covering ground while other armies would have made camp. Jon's urgency infected them. They understood they were racing towards something momentous. On the third day, they left the neck behind and entered the Riverlands proper. The landscape opened up. Rolling hills, rivers running clear instead of murky marsh water, forests of oak and ash instead of swamp willows. And roads. Real roads where armies could march. "Robb's camp should be near the Twins by now," Jojen said, consulting with his scouts. "If we push through the night, we can reach him by dawn." They rode through darkness, Ghost ranging ahead to scout. As the sky began to lighten in the east, a Cranogman scout returned at a gallop. "Army ahead. 20,000 men, maybe more. Banners of the direwolf and the trout. Robb's army, the northern forces combined with their Riverlands allies." Jon's heart hammered in his chest. He was close now. So close. "Any sign of the Twins?" Jon asked. 2 days' march ahead of the army. They're moving slow, baggage trains, camp followers. The Red Wedding hadn't happened yet. "Take me to their camp," Jon ordered. The Cranogmen guided him forward. As the sun rose fully, Jon saw the northern army spread across the Riverlands. Tents by the thousand, campfires smoking, men preparing for another day's march. Banners fluttered in the morning breeze. The Stark direwolf, the Tully trout, the Umber chains, the Mormont bear. The army that had fought so hard for so long against the Lannisters, not knowing that their greatest threat came from within. Jon rode toward the command area, Ghost at his side, the Cranogmen following. Northern soldiers saw him approach and stared. Word spread quickly. A rider from the north, a direwolf. 200 Cranogmen appearing like ghosts from the morning mist. A massive man stepped into Jon's path. Great Jon Umber, nearly 7 feet tall with a voice like thunder. "Hold there. Who are you?" "Jon Snow. I need to see Robb Stark immediately." The Great Jon's eyes widened. "Jon Snow? Ned's bastard. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at the wall." "I deserted." Jon dismounted, meeting the Great Jon's stare. "I came to warn the king in the north that he's riding into a trap. Now take me to Robb or get out of my way." "A deserter?" The Great Jon's hand went to his sword. "You'll hang, boy. But first I save my brother's life." Jon's voice carried across the gathering crowd. More soldiers were appearing, drawn by the commotion. A woman's voice cut through the tension. "Jon?" Catelyn Stark emerged from a tent, her face a mixture of shock and anger. She looked older than Jon remembered, worn down by the war and grief. But her eyes were the same, Tully blue, sharp as daggers. "Lady Stark." Jon inclined his head. "What are you doing here? You took the black, you swore—" "Robb is walking into a trap. Walder Frey and Roose Bolton are planning to massacre the northern leadership at Edmure's wedding. I've ridden 1,000 miles to warn him. Will you let me speak to him or not?" Catelyn's face went pale. For a long moment she stared at Jon, searching his face for any sign of deception, then she turned to the Great Jon. "Bring him to the command tent. Under guard. If he's lying, we'll hang him properly. If he's telling the truth," she didn't finish the sentence. They brought Jon through the camp under guard. Soldiers whispered and pointed. Ghost walked beside him, and none of the guards were brave enough to separate the direwolf from his master. The Cranogmen followed at a distance, Jojen Reed's green eyes watching everything. The command tent was larger than the others, its canvas walls marked with the direwolf sigil. Guards stood at the entrance, hard men with northern faces, loyal to House Stark for generations. Catelyn entered first. Jon heard her voice from inside. "Robb, you need to see this." Then Jon was pushed through the tent flaps, and he saw his brother for the first time in over a year. Robb Stark stood over a war table covered in maps, wearing a crown of bronze and iron. He'd grown into his kingship, broader in the shoulders, harder in the face, with eyes that had seen too much death. A beautiful woman with dark hair and olive skin stood beside him, one hand resting on her swollen belly. Talisa, his wife, pregnant with the child that, in Jon's vision, would die before being born. Robb looked up and froze. Jon. Hello, Robb. Jon saw joy flash across Robb's face, then confusion, then hardening resolve. You deserted the Night's Watch? I did. Why? To save you? From what? Jon took a breath. This was the moment. Everything depended on what happened next. From dying at the Twins, from being murdered at Edmure's wedding feast by Walder Frey and Roose Bolton, who are conspiring with Tywin Lannister to end the war by massacring every northern lord under a banner of guest right. Silence. Complete silence in the tent. Edmure Tully, who Jon hadn't noticed in the corner, laughed nervously. That's insane. We're attending my wedding, it's safe. And I can prove it. Robb's jaw tightened. How could you possibly know this? I saw it. A green dream. I lived through the Red Wedding. I felt you die, Robb. I felt Lady Catelyn's throat being cut. I was there. Catelyn swayed. Talisa gasped. Robb's face went very still. You're not well, Robb said carefully. Jon, you've ridden too hard. You're exhausted. I'm completely sane. Jon stepped forward. The guards moved to stop him, but Robb waved them back. I'll tell you exactly what happens. The feast will be going well. Then the musicians will start playing the Rains of Castamere. Lady Catelyn will notice chainmail under Roose Bolton's sleeve and realize something is wrong. But it will be too late. The doors will close. Crossbowmen disguised as musicians will reveal themselves in the galleries. His voice gentled. You'll be stabbed first, in the stomach, multiple times. They'll kill your child before they kill Robb. He'll watch you die before the crossbow bolts hit him. Talisa's hand went to her belly, her face white. Jon faced Catelyn. Grey Wind will be locked outside the hall. 4 crossbowmen will shoot him while he's trapped in a pen. And you, Lady Catelyn, you'll watch all of this happen. You'll watch your son die. You'll try to bargain with Walder Frey, taking a hostage, but it won't matter. They'll cut Robb's throat right in front of you. And then they'll cut yours. Catelyn was shaking now. How could you know these things? Because I lived them. Jon met her eyes. I felt your pain, your grief, the moment when everything inside you just stopped, when you didn't fight anymore because there was nothing left worth fighting for. A sound came from the corner of the tent. Roose Bolton, who Jon hadn't seen standing in the shadows, stepped forward. His face was composed, but his eyes were calculating. This is madness, Your Grace. The boy has clearly lost his mind. Green dreams, visions. He's been in the wild too long. You've been writing letters to Tywin Lannister, planning this for weeks, negotiating the terms of your reward. You'll be named Warden of the North after Robb is dead. Lies. Roose's voice was calm, controlled. Wild accusations from a deserter. Then let us search your belongings, Jon said. Check your ravens. If I'm lying, execute me here. I'll even tell you what you'll say when you kill Robb. Jon quoted the words exactly as he'd heard them in the vision, as Howland Reed had instructed him to. You'll step forward after the crossbows have done their work. Robb will be wounded but not dead. You'll stab him through the heart, and as you do, you'll say 5 words. The Lannisters send their regards. The tent went absolutely silent. Catelyn Stark's face had gone from pale to ashen. Those 5 words, so specific, so chilling, spoken about a moment that hadn't happened yet, struck her like a physical blow. How could you know that? Her voice was barely a whisper. How could you possibly know those exact words? Because I watched him say them, in my vision. I watched him murder you, Robb. I felt the blade enter your heart. I heard those words as clearly as I hear my own voice now. Robb's hand had moved to his sword. He was looking at Roose Bolton with new eyes. Not trust, but calculation, suspicion. Lord Bolton, Robb said quietly, I'm going to need to search your tent. Your Grace, you can't seriously. The Leech Lord stood very still, his face betraying nothing. Search if you must. You'll find nothing. His face was pale, his hands shaking. In his grip he held a sealed letter. Catelyn took it from him, broke the seal. Read. Her hands began to shake as badly as Robb's. It's Roose's seal, she said in a hollow voice, his handwriting. It's addressed to Tywin Lannister. What does it say? Jon asked, though he already knew. Catelyn read aloud, her voice breaking. The Stark will attend the wedding at the Twins. All is proceeding as discussed. I await your confirmation and the promised protections. The North will be mine. R.B. You were going to betray us. I was going to survive, Roose said. Tywin Lannister is winning this war. The North is bleeding. I made a practical choice. You were going to murder my family under guest right. I simply chose which corpses would include me. Robb's hand tightened on his sword hilt. For a moment Jon thought his brother might execute Roose right there, but Robb's voice when he spoke was controlled, cold. Arrest him. Put him in chains. We'll deal with him properly later. He turned to Jon. You were right about everything. Jon nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. I need to tell you the rest, about what I learned on my way here, about who I really am. Jojen Reed stood there, his face urgent. Jon Snow. Northern scouts report another rider approaching from the south, fast, bearing a message. They all moved outside. A single horseman was indeed approaching, his horse lathered with foam from hard riding. He wore the colors of House Frey. The rider pulled up before Robb's tent, breathing hard. Your Grace, Lord Walder Frey sends word. The wedding date has been moved. It's tomorrow night instead of 3 days hence. He says there are concerns about weather, about timing. He requests you arrive immediately to prepare. Tomorrow night, Jon felt ice slide down his spine. They'd almost been too late. If he'd been delayed even one more day, if the Cranogmen hadn't known the secret paths, if his horse had died in the wrong place, Robb's face was granite. Thank Lord Walder for his message. Tell him we'll be there. The rider departed. In the silence that followed, Robb turned to his war council. We're still going to the Twins, but not as victims. His voice was steel. Jon, tell me everything, every detail of your vision, and then tell me how we turn their trap into ours. Jon smiled grimly. I thought you'd never ask. The war council assembled in Robb's command tent as the sun climbed higher. Every northern lord of importance crowded inside. The great Jon Umber, massive and fierce. Rickard Karstark, his face still carved with grief over his sons. Mage Mormont, hard as the island that bred her. Brynden Blackfish Tully, Catelyn's uncle and a warrior of legendary skill. Ednir Tully stood near his sister, his face troubled. And in chains in the corner, watched by 4 guards, sat Roose Bolton silent as a corpse. Jon stood before the war table, the maps of the Twins spread before him. Ghost lay at his feet. The Cranogmen had positioned themselves outside the tent, a ring of protection that made the northern soldiers uneasy with their strangeness. Tell us everything, Robb said. Every detail you saw in this vision. Jon closed his eyes, pulling the green dream back to the surface. It came easily. The vision had burned itself into his mind with perfect clarity. The feast is in the great hall of the eastern castle. You'll be at the high table with Lady Catelyn, Talisa, Edmure, and his new bride. The other northern lords will be scattered at tables below. Outside in the camps beyond the walls, your common soldiers will be feasting separately, unarmed, as guest right requires. Guest right, the great Jon spat. The Freys invoke the oldest law and then plan to piss on it. They'll play throughout the feast, normal songs at first. Then, when Walder Frey gives the signal, they'll start the Rains of Castamere. The Lannister song, about Tywin destroying House Rain. It's deliberate. A message from Tywin through his co-conspirators. When that song begins, the musicians will drop their instruments and reveal crossbows. They'll fire down into the hall at the northern lords. Simultaneously, the doors will be barred from outside. Frey soldiers disguised as servants throughout the hall will draw weapons. And outside, Brynden Tully's voice was grim, the northern soldiers in the camps will be attacked by Frey and Bolton forces. They'll be unarmed, unprepared, slaughtered. Jon opened his eyes. It's coordinated, total, designed to decapitate the northern rebellion in one night. Then Rickard Karstark spoke, his voice bitter. So we don't go. We refuse the wedding, march around the Twins, find another crossing. There is no other crossing for an army this size, Brynden said. Not for 100 miles in either direction. The Twins control the only viable route, south. Then we lay siege, the great Jon growled. Tear those castles down stone by stone. A siege could take months, Robb said. Months we don't have. The Lannisters would move against us, catch us between their army and the Twins' walls. He looked at Jon. You said we turned their trap into ours. How? Jon leaned over the map, his finger tracing the Twins' layout. We use the same plan they're using. Infiltration. Disguise. We put our own men inside the castle before the feast begins. How many men? Edmure asked. 300 elite fighters disguised as servants, cooks, musicians, stable hands. We send them in as part of the baggage train, the wedding preparations. Walder Frey expects a lot of activity before a wedding. Extra help, additional staff. We hide our soldiers in plain sight. Mage Mormont's eyes narrowed. And when the trap springs, our men in the gallery will be the musicians. When the Rains of Castamere starts playing, it will be our signal, not theirs. Our crossbowmen fire on the Freys, not on us. Our infiltrators throughout the hall secure the doors, protect the northern lords, and kill every Frey soldier they can find. The Blackfish studied the map with a warrior's eye. It could work. If we get our men into position without being discovered, if they can maintain discipline until the signal, if we can control the gallery, he looked up. That's a lot of ifs, Jon Snow. I know, but it's better than walking blind into their massacre. Robb paced the tent, his crown catching the light. We need to move fast. The wedding is tomorrow night. That gives us barely a day to select our fighters, prepare the disguises, infiltrate the twins. There's one more thing, Jon said quietly. We need to intercept any remaining messages between Roose Bolton and Tywin Lannister. Right now, Tywin doesn't know his plot has been discovered. If Bolton manages to send warning, we lose the advantage. All eyes turned to Roose, who sat in his chains with perfect composure. His pale eyes met Jon's without emotion. The Leech Lord doesn't work alone, Jon continued. He has men loyal to him in this army. Soldiers, maybe officers. One of them might try to send word south. Then we root them out, the great Jon said. Find every Bolton man, arrest them all. Too obvious, Brynden countered. If we start mass arrests, it signals something is wrong. Walder Frey will hear of it and suspect. Robb stopped pacing. We do it quietly. Separate the Bolton forces, redistribute them among northern units. Put them where we can watch them, and we set a trap for any messengers trying to reach Tywin. What kind of trap? Catelyn asked. Jon had been thinking about this since Greywater Watch. Since Howland Reed had explained how correspondence worked in the conspiracy, Bolton would have sent his final confirmation by now, the letter we found. But after his arrest, his remaining loyalists might try to warn Tywin that the plan is compromised. They'll send a rider, not a raven. Too risky to trust ravens that might be intercepted. So we watch the road south, Robb said, understanding. Station scouts on every route toward Harrenhal and King's Landing. Any Bolton man trying to leave gets captured. Not just captured, Jon said. We need whatever message they're carrying. Physical proof we can show to the other lords, evidence that the conspiracy goes beyond just Roose. The great Jon grinned, a savage expression. I'll lead the hunt myself. Any Bolton bastard tries to ride south, I'll bring him back with his message intact. Might have to persuade him a bit, but he'll talk. Do it, Robb ordered, quietly. And Great Jon? I want them alive for questioning. We need to know who else is involved. Men were selected for the infiltration. Northern soldiers who could pass for servants, who had the discipline to wait hidden, who wouldn't break when the moment came. The Cranogmen offered their expertise in moving unseen, in disguising weapons, in silent killing. Jojen Reed worked with the Blackfish to plan the gallery takeover. Jon found himself alone with Robb for the first time since his arrival. They stood outside the command tent, watching the organized chaos of the army preparing for something their soldiers didn't fully understand yet. I can't believe you're here, Robb said quietly. I thought I'd never see you again. When you went to the wall, when you took the black, he trailed off. I never meant to break my vows. The Night's Watch was supposed to be my whole life. What changed? I saw you die. Jon's voice was steady. I felt it, Robb. Your confusion when Rose's blade went in, your helplessness watching Talisa murdered. Your last thoughts were of Mother, of Lady Catelyn. You tried to say her name but couldn't. Robb's jaw tightened. The Green Dream showed you all that? It showed me more. It showed me what comes after the wars between men, the real threat. Jon looked north, toward where the wall stood invisible beyond the horizon. The White Walkers, the army of the dead. Winter is coming, and it's bringing something worse than Lannisters or Freys or any human enemy. If we don't survive to face that threat, none of this matters. You sound like old Nan's stories. Old Nan's stories are real. I've seen it. Jon turned to face his brother. But before we can fight that war, we have to win this one. We have to survive the twins. And then I need to tell you something else. Something about who I really am. Robb studied him. "You're Jon Snow, my brother, my father's bastard. What else is there?" "Everything," Jon said. "But it can wait until after we've survived tomorrow night." The Great Jon's trap was set by midday. Scouts positioned themselves on every road leading south from the army's position, hidden in woods and farms, watching for any rider bearing Bolton colors or attempting to leave furtively. The Bolton forces themselves were quietly separated, reassigned to different units, placed under the command of loyal northern lords, effectively isolated without making it obvious they were being imprisoned. The army began its march toward the Twins shortly after noon, moving with deliberate slowness to give the infiltration team time to work. 300 northern soldiers, carefully selected, broke off from the main force in small groups, each taking a different route toward the Twins. They carried forged documents, identifying them as servants from various Riverlands houses, as musicians hired for the wedding, as cooks and washerwomen and stable hands. Their weapons were hidden in flour barrels, in instrument cases, wrapped in linens and buried in supply carts. Jon rode with the main army, but his mind was on the infiltrators. So much depended on them reaching the Twins undetected, on maintaining their disguises, on getting into position before the feast. One mistake, one suspicious Frey guard, one failed cover story, and the entire plan collapsed. As the sun began to set, a scout rode hard from the south. He pulled up before Robb's position, breathing heavy. "Your Grace, we caught one. Bolton man trying to ride for Harrenhal. He's being brought to you now." Within minutes, the Great Jon arrived with a prisoner, a young man in his 20s, wearing traveling clothes but with the flayed man of House Bolton on a chain around his neck. His face was bruised, one eye swelling shut. Two of the Great Jon's men dragged him before Robb. "Found him on the Harrenhal road, riding hard," the Great Jon said. "Had this on him." He tossed a sealed letter to Robb. Robb broke the seal. "Read." His expression darkened. He passed the letter to Catelyn, then to Jon. The letter was brief, written in a hasty hand. "Lord Tywin, the plot is discovered. Stark knows. Bolton is arrested. Wedding proceeds, but trap compromised. Advise, Steelshanks Walton, one of Roose Bolton's most trusted men, a captain who commanded Bolton forces." "How many others tried to leave?" Robb asked the Great Jon. "Just this one, far as we can tell. But there's others still in the army. Bolton loyalists who haven't shown their hand yet." Robb turned to the prisoner. "How many men does Bolton have loyal to him in my army?" The man spat blood. "Go fuck yourself, Crow." The Great Jon backhanded him casually, and the prisoner went down hard. "I'll ask once more," Robb said, his voice cold. "How many men? Who are they? What were your orders?" The prisoner stayed silent. The Great Jon reached for his dagger. "Wait," Jon said. He knelt beside the prisoner, meeting his eyes. "You're Steelshanks Walton. I know you were following orders. I know Bolton promised you rewards, land, titles, everything you've never had serving under the Leech Lord. But those promises are ashes now. Bolton's arrested. The plot is exposed. Tywin isn't getting this message. The Red Wedding isn't happening. You have one choice: cooperate and live, or stay silent and hang." Steelshanks stared at him. Jon saw the calculation in his eyes, saw him weighing loyalty against survival. "If I talk, what happens to me?" "You go to the wall," Robb said. "Take the black. Serve out your days on the wall instead of swinging from a rope. That's the offer. We were supposed to cause chaos during the wedding feast, set fires in the camps, kill sentries, make it easier for the Freys to slaughter your soldiers. Bolton gave us each a target, specific men to kill when the signal came." "Who are they?" Jon pressed. "Names." Steelshanks provided them. 23 names, ranks, positions within the Northern Army. As he spoke, Robb's scribes wrote frantically, creating a list of traitors embedded in their own forces. When Steelshanks finished, Robb nodded to the Great Jon. "Arrest them all, quietly, no announcements. Just take them into custody and hold them under guard. We'll deal with them after the Twins." "With pleasure, Your Grace." As they led Steelshanks away, Catelyn spoke quietly. "We have the proof now. Physical evidence of the conspiracy, Roose's letter to Tywin, this warning from his man, the list of Bolton loyalists embedded in our army. It's enough," Robb agreed. "More than enough to justify what comes next. Roose Bolton couldn't be allowed to live, couldn't be imprisoned long-term, couldn't be sent to the wall, couldn't be kept where his remaining loyalists might try to free him. The Leech Lord had to die." "I'll do it," Jon said. Both Robb and Catelyn looked at him. "I'll execute him. In my vision, he killed you with a blade through the heart. Let me return the favor. I've already killed men, Robb, in the wildling raids defending the wall. One more death won't keep me awake at night, especially not his. Robb sat in a camp chair that served as a throne, his bronze and iron crown on his head. Catelyn stood at his right hand, Jon at his left. The northern lords formed a semicircle, witnesses to northern justice. Roose Bolton was brought forward in chains. His face remained calm, almost bored, as if this were happening to someone else. Roose Bolton, Robb said formally, you stand accused of high treason, of conspiring with Tywin Lannister to murder your king and your fellow lords, of planning to violate guest right, the most sacred law of gods and men, of selling the North to our enemies for promises of power. How do you answer these charges? I made a practical decision, Roose said in his soft, precise voice. You're losing this war, Your Grace. The Lannisters have more men, more gold, more resources. When I calculated the odds, the conclusion was clear. Siding with Tywin offered better chances of survival than following a boy king into inevitable defeat. So you admit it. I admit I'm a realist. Sentiment is a luxury for those who can afford it. I couldn't. We have your letter to Tywin, Catelyn said, her voice shaking with controlled rage. We have your man's confession. We have the names of 23 Bolton soldiers you planted in our army to murder their brothers. You're not a realist. You're a traitor. Realist. The words change, but the calculation remains the same. I chose survival. You chose wrong, Robb said. He stood. Roose Bolton, I sentence you to death for high treason. You will be executed immediately. He looked at Jon. Do you still want to carry out the sentence? Yes. Jon drew Longclaw. The Valyrian steel caught the dying sunlight, ripples of light running along the blade. They made Roose kneel. The Leech Lord showed no fear, no emotion at all. He knelt in the dirt before Jon Snow and waited for death with the same cold calculation he'd lived his entire life. Jon thought about the vision, about watching Roose stab Robb through the heart, about hearing those 5 terrible words, the Lannisters send their regards, about Catelyn's scream, about Talisa's murder, about Grey Wind dying in a pen, about everything this man had been willing to do for power. In my vision, Jon said quietly, only loud enough for Roose to hear, you said the Lannisters send their regards, as you killed my brother. So I'll say this, the North remembers. He drove Longclaw through Roose Bolton's heart, not from behind as Roose would have done to Robb, but face to face, letting the Leech Lord see his executioner's eyes. The Valyrian steel slid through leather and flesh and bone with terrible ease. Roose's pale eyes widened slightly, surprise perhaps, or maybe just the body's autonomic response to dying. Then the light went out of those eyes, and Roose Bolton was dead. Jon withdrew Longclaw and stepped back. The Northern Lords watched in grim silence. Justice had been done. The traitor was dead. But Jon felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, only a cold certainty that this was necessary, that some threats had to be eliminated completely. Burn the body, Robb ordered. I don't want any Bolton loyalists recovering it, making a shrine of their lord's corpse. Burn it and scatter the ashes. As they built the pyre, Catelyn approached Jon. She studied him with those sharp, tully eyes, and Jon wondered what she saw, the boy she'd raised while resenting every moment, or something else. Thank you, she said quietly. Jon blinked in surprise. For what? For riding 1,000 miles to save my son, for breaking your vows, risking your life, deserting the Night's Watch, for, she paused, choosing words carefully, for caring about Robb despite how I treated you all those years. You didn't know, Jon said. Know what? He almost told her then. Almost revealed what Howland Reed had shared, about Lyanna and Rhaegar, about the lie Ned had lived for 17 years. But this wasn't the moment. First, they had to survive the twins. Nothing, Jon said. We should prepare for tomorrow. They burned Roose Bolton's body as the stars came out. The flames consumed the Leech Lord completely, leaving nothing but ashes that were scattered to the wind. His 23 loyalists were placed under heavy guard, held in a separate camp under the watchful eyes of men the great Jon personally vouched for. That night, Jon couldn't sleep. He sat outside his tent with Ghost, watching the Northern army settling in for what might be their last night before battle. Tomorrow they would arrive at the twins. Tomorrow, the infiltrators would be tested. Tomorrow everything would either work perfectly or collapse into disaster. Jojen Reed found him there, the boy's green eyes luminous in the starlight. "You're worried about tomorrow," Jojen said. "It wasn't a question. 300 men have to maintain perfect discipline while surrounded by enemies. The gallery team has to actually be able to play instruments well enough to fool the Freys. The timing has to be exact. Any one of 100 things could go wrong. They won't. You've seen it in your green dreams? I've seen possibilities, futures that branch and split like tree roots. In most of them, you survive tomorrow. In most of them, the trap works." Jojen sat beside him. "But there's something else you should know. I've seen you standing before Robb, revealing a truth that changes everything. I've seen a harp made of silver and letters written in a careful hand. I've seen the moment when a bastard becomes a prince." Jon looked at him sharply. "Howland told you. My father tells me many things, but I knew before he spoke. The green dreams showed me." Jojen's young face was solemn. "You're afraid of that moment, aren't you? More afraid of revealing your parentage than of the Red Wedding. Everything changes when Robb knows the truth. Our relationship, my place in the world, everything I thought I understood about myself, everything already changed the moment Howland spoke the words. You've just been delaying the acknowledgement." Jojen stood. "Tomorrow you save your brother from one death. Soon after, you'll have to tell him the truth. Both are necessary, both are hard, but you'll do what needs to be done. That's who you are, Jon Targaryen." The name sounded strange in Jon's ears. Foreign. Wrong, somehow, even though he knew it was right. He'd been Jon Snow for 17 years. How did you just become someone else? The next morning dawned clear and cold. The Northern Army broke camp early and began the final march to the Twins. The great castles appeared on the horizon around midday, 2 identical stone fortresses rising from either bank of the Green Fork, connected by a fortified bridge. The water tower stood in the middle of the bridge, ancient and imposing. From a distance, the Twins looked like something from a song. Up close, Jon knew they would reveal themselves as a trap that had claimed countless lives over the centuries, and tomorrow night they would try to claim more. The infiltrators had gone ahead in waves throughout the previous day and night. By now they should be inside the Twins, scattered through the kitchens and servant quarters, the galleries and stables. The musicians should be in position, the weapons should be hidden, everything should be ready. Should be. Robb's army made camp outside the Twins' walls, in the fields that had been designated for them. Walder Frey's steward greeted them, a thin man with a obsequious smile. "Your Grace, Lord Walder is most pleased you've arrived in time for the wedding. The feast is tonight, as my lord informed you. Everything is prepared." "We're honored to be here," Robb said with a straight face. Behind him, Talisa held his arm, her pregnant belly visible beneath her dress. "My uncle's wedding to one of Lord Walder's daughters is a joyous occasion. Lord Walder asks that you and your highborn lords enter the castle at sunset for the ceremony and feast. Your soldiers are welcome to feast in the camps. We've prepared food and wine for them." Most generous. As the steward left, Robb turned to Jon and spoke quietly. "The trap is set. Ours and theirs. Tonight we find out which one springs first." The afternoon passed in terrible slowness. Jon checked and rechecked his weapons. Longclaw hung at his hip. A dagger was strapped to his calf, another in his boot. He wore mail under his clothes, not enough to be obvious, but enough to maybe stop a blade. Ghost sensed his tension and pressed against Jon's leg. The direwolf would stay outside during the feast, along with Grey Wind. The Freys wouldn't allow direwolves in the hall, and Jon wouldn't risk Ghost being trapped inside if things went wrong. As the sun descended toward the horizon, Robb assembled the Northern Lords. They would enter the Twins in their finest clothes, playing the role of honored guests at a wedding. But each man wore concealed weapons. Each had been briefed on the plan. When the signal came, they would know what to do. Catelyn appeared in a dress of blue and silver, the Tully colors. She looked beautiful and terrified at the same time. Jon knew she was thinking about the vision he'd described, about watching her son die. "It won't happen that way this time," Jon told her. "I've changed the future. I hope you're right." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Because if you're wrong, if this is all some fevered delusion, we're walking into our deaths." "I'm not wrong." Robb stood beside her, and for a moment they looked so young, so vulnerable. A king and queen barely into their 20s, about to walk into a castle where half the people wanted them dead. "Stay close to me during the feast," Robb told Talisa. "No matter what happens, stay close." Walder Frey's steward appeared to escort them inside. "It's time, Your Grace." Robb took a deep breath, looked at Jon, at Catelyn. At the northern lords assembled around him, the Great Jon, the Blackfish, Mage Mormont, Rickard Karstark, all the men and women who'd followed him through this war. "Remember the plan," Robb said quietly. "When you hear the Rains of Castamere, hit the floor if you're not near a weapon. If you are near a weapon, use it. Our people in the gallery will fire first. Trust them." They moved toward the gates of the twins. Jon's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. The moment everything either worked or fell apart. The gates opened. Walder Frey stood in the courtyard beyond, ancient and leering, surrounded by his enormous brood of children and grandchildren. He was 90 years old, held together by spite and ambition, grinning with a mouth that held more gums than teeth. "The king in the north," Walder called out in his reedy voice. "Late as usual, but you're here now, and that's what matters. Welcome, welcome. We've got a wedding to celebrate." Robb smiled, playing his part. "Lord Walder, thank you for your hospitality. Bread and salt the old ways. We honor the old ways here at the Twins." Walder's eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement or malice. Come in. The feast awaits." Jon's eyes cataloged everything, the positions of guards, the layout of corridors, the locations of exits. He saw servants moving through the halls and wondered how many were his infiltrators, how many were genuine Freys. In the great hall, tables were laid out for hundreds of guests. The high table sat on a raised dais. Musicians' gallery overlooked the hall from above. Jon's eyes went to the gallery and saw figures with instruments, lutes, drums, horns. Were those his people? Or Frey crossbowmen disguised as musicians? There was no way to know without giving himself away by staring too hard. They were seated at the high table, Robb and Talisa in the center, Catelyn beside Robb. Edmure and his bride, a pretty girl named Rosalind Frey who looked genuinely happy, probably unaware of her father's plot. Jon was placed further down, close enough to act but not so close as to be obvious. The hall filled with guests, northern lords mixed with Freys. Servants moved among the tables with wine and food. Jon tried to spot which servants were infiltrators but couldn't tell. The disguises were too good, or his people were too well trained, or both. Bread and salt were brought out, the sacred symbols of guest right. Walder Frey made a great show of offering them to Robb. "Eat my bread and salt, your grace. Be welcome under my roof." Robb took the bread, ate it, took a pinch of salt. "Thank you, Lord Walder. Your hospitality honors the old laws." Guest right had been invoked. By every tradition of Westeros, by the laws of gods and men, Robb and his people were safe now, protected, inviolate. Unless their host was planning to break the most sacred law in existence, the wedding ceremony began. Edmure and Rosalind stood before a septon who droned through the traditional words. Jon barely heard them. His attention was on the gallery, on the servants, on the doors, looking for any sign that the trap was about to spring. The ceremony concluded. Edmure kissed his bride. The hall erupted in cheers and applause. Then the feast truly began. Food was brought out in enormous quantities. Roasted meats, fresh bread, vegetables, pies, all the abundance of the Riverlands. Wine flowed freely. The northern lords ate and drank, but Jon noticed they were being careful, not drinking too much, staying alert. Walder Frey stood and made a rambling toast about marriage and loyalty and the bonds between houses. His words dripped with irony that only those who knew the truth could hear. Jon watched the old man and felt cold rage. This ancient lord was planning to butcher guests under his own roof, and he was enjoying it. An hour passed, then another. The feast continued. Musicians in the gallery played cheerful songs, dancing tunes, drinking songs, wedding ballads. Jon's nerves stretched tighter with each passing minute. When would it happen? When would the signal come? Then the musicians stopped playing. There was a pause, just a heartbeat of silence, and then the first notes of the Rains of Castamere drifted down from the gallery. Catelyn's head snapped up. Her hand went to Robb's arm, gripping tight. Jon saw her eyes go wide with recognition and horror. The Lannister song. The signal. It was happening. Everything seemed to slow down. Jon saw Catelyn's eyes go to Walder Frey, saw her notice the old lord smiling, saw her gaze drop to the high table to where serving men were positioning themselves near the northern lords. Then Catelyn's eyes went to the servant standing behind Roose Bolton's empty seat, the seat where the Leech Lord would have been sitting if he hadn't been executed yesterday. The servant's sleeve rode up slightly, and Catelyn saw chainmail beneath. "Robb," she said urgently. "Robb, the chainmail. Just like Jon said. It's happening. It's..." The music swelled to the chorus, and Jon Snow stood up and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Now!" 30 northern soldiers raised crossbows that had been hidden in drum cases and loot boxes and behind tapestries. But they didn't aim at the Starks. They aimed at Walder Frey and his sons seated at the high table. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Crossbow bolts flew. Walder Frey screamed as a bolt took him in the shoulder. Lothar Frey, lame Lothar, one of Walder's most dangerous sons, caught a bolt in the throat and went down choking. Black Walder Rivers took one in the chest and crashed backwards off his chair. The hall erupted into chaos. Frey soldiers who'd been disguised as servants drew their weapons, but so did the northern infiltrators scattered throughout the hall. Steel rang against steel. Men screamed. Blood began to flow. But this time, it was Frey blood. The northern lords at the tables below the dais moved with practiced precision. The Great Jon grabbed a table and flipped it, creating cover. Mage Mormont produced a dagger from her sleeve and buried it in the eye of a Frey soldier. The Blackfish was suddenly armed with a sword. How he'd smuggled it in, Jon didn't know, and was carving through Frey guards with lethal efficiency. Robb pulled Talisa down behind the high table. Catelyn crouched beside them. Jon drew Longclaw and positioned himself between them and the nearest threat. A Frey servant came at Jon with a dagger. Jon's blade took the man's hand off at the wrist, then came back around to open his throat. The servant went down in a spray of blood. More crossbow bolts rained from the gallery, systematically taking out Frey commanders and armed men. The northern infiltrators had the high ground and were using it with devastating effect. "The doors!" someone shouted. "Seal the doors!" Who'd been disguised as servants ran to the great hall's doors. But instead of barring the northern lords inside as the Freys had planned, they barred the doors from the inside, trapping the Freys with their intended victims. The tables had turned. The Red Wedding had become the Frey massacre. Jon fought his way toward Walder Frey. The ancient lord was trying to flee, wounded, supported by 2 of his sons. The Great Jon got there first, his massive hand closing on Walder's collar. "Going somewhere, you treacherous old fuck?" He dragged Walder back to the high table and threw him down at Robb's feet. The fighting was already subsiding. Northern infiltrators outnumbered the Frey soldiers who'd been positioned in the hall. More northern fighters were streaming in from the servant quarters now, reinforcing their brothers. The Frey resistance collapsed quickly. These weren't hardened warriors, but household guards who'd expected easy victims, not armed and ready opponents. Within minutes, it was over. The Great Hall of the Twins looked like a slaughterhouse, but the corpses were Freys. The northern losses were minimal. A few men wounded, one dead, nothing compared to what would have happened if Jon hadn't warned them. Robb stood over Walder Frey. His sword was drawn, his face harder than Jon had ever seen it. "You plan to murder me," Robb said quietly. "Under your own roof." After invoking guest right, after offering bread and salt, Walder clutched his wounded shoulder, his face twisted with pain and fury. "You broke your oath. You swore to marry one of my daughters, and you married some foreign whore instead. So you conspired with my enemies to slaughter my entire family." Robb's voice was ice. "You violated the most sacred law in Westeros. Sacred laws are for fools and children. This is war. You do what you must to survive." Catelyn stepped forward. She held something in her hand, a knife she'd taken from a dead Frey soldier. "You were going to kill my son," she said, her voice shaking. "You were going to murder Robb right in front of me. You were going to cut his throat while I watched. And you would have done the same to me if our positions were reversed," Walder spat. "No," Catelyn said, "we wouldn't have, because we have honor." She looked at Robb. "He's yours to judge, Your Grace." Robb stared down at Walder Frey for a long moment. Then he raised his sword. "The North remembers, Lord Walder, and we were warned." "Wait," Walder's voice cracked. "Wait. I can give you the twins. The crossing, I can. You have nothing I want." Robb brought the sword down. Walder Frey's head rolled across the blood-slicked floor of his own great hall. The remaining Freys in the hall, those who'd survived, dropped their weapons and fell to their knees. The fight had gone out of them completely with their lord's death. Outside, Jon could hear more fighting. The northern soldiers in the camps had been alerted by the sounds from the hall and had armed themselves, fighting off the Frey and Bolton forces that had been supposed to massacre them. But the Bolton forces were leaderless now, their lord dead, their lieutenants arrested, and the Frey forces had lost their element of surprise. The battle outside was sharp, but short. By the time Jon made it to the courtyard, northern banners were flying over the twins. They'd won. The Red Wedding had been prevented. The trap had been turned. The Freys and Boltons who'd planned to murder the northern leadership were dead or captured. Jon found Robb and Catelyn standing on the battlements, looking out over the camps where thousands of northern soldiers were celebrating their survival. Talisa stood with them, unharmed, her hand still resting protectively over her unborn child. "We did it," Robb said, sounding almost disbelieving. "Your vision, we changed it." "We changed this one," Jon said. "But there's more coming. More threats. More battles. I know." Robb turned to face him. "And that's why you need to tell me the rest, the thing you've been holding back, who you really are." Jon took a deep breath. This was the moment. No more delays. "Not here. Somewhere private. You, Lady Catelyn, and me. What I have to tell you, it changes everything." They met in a chamber high in the water tower, in the heart of the bridge connecting the two castles of the twins. Just the three of them, Robb, Catelyn, and Jon. Ghost lay at Jon's feet. Through the window they could see northern soldiers securing the castles, rounding up surviving Freys, taking control of the most strategic crossing in the Riverlands. Jon pulled out the bundle Howland Reed had given him. The silver harp gleamed in the candlelight, its strings still intact after all these years. The letters were tied with faded ribbon, Ned's careful handwriting visible on the parchment. "Before I tell you," Jon said quietly, "I need you to understand that Father, that Ned, lied to protect me. Everything he did, every choice he made about me was to keep me alive." Catelyn's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Jon placed the harp on the table between them. "This belonged to Rhaegar Targaryen, Prince of Dragonstone. Your Aunt Lyanna kept it with her at the Tower of Joy." The silence that followed was absolute. Robb stared at the harp, then at Jon, his face uncomprehending. "The Tower of Joy," Catelyn whispered. "Where my mother died," Jon corrected gently. "Lyanna Stark was my mother, not some tavern wench Ned bedded during the war. Lyanna," he heard her last words to Ned, "promise me. Promise to protect her son. Promise to hide him from Robert Baratheon, who would have killed any child of Rhaegar Targaryen without hesitation." Jon's voice was steady, despite the enormity of what he was revealing. "So Ned lied. He claimed me as his bastard. Let everyone think he'd betrayed his marriage vows. Let Catelyn hate him. Let me grow up ashamed. Always the outsider, always the stain on House Stark's honor. He did all of that to keep me alive." Catelyn had sat down heavily, her hand over her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. "Ned never betrayed me. There was no other woman. He was protecting his sister's child." "He broke his honor for you, Jon," Robb said slowly, still processing. "The most honorable man in Westeros, lied for 17 years. Read them," Ned wrote to Howland over the years. "He never mentions me by name, but he talks about a promise to his sister. About protecting someone innocent. It's all there, if you know what to look for." Robb picked up one of the letters, began reading. Catelyn took another. Jon watched their faces as understanding dawned, as the pieces fell into place, as 17 years of assumed truth dissolved into revealed lie. "If Lyanna was your mother," Robb said carefully, "then who was your father?" "Rhaegar Targaryen." Jon met his eyes. They married in secret, loved each other. When she became pregnant, Rhaegar hid her to protect her from his father's madness. But Robert's rebellion came, and Rhaegar died at the Trident, and Lyanna died in childbirth, and Ned was left with a choice: tell the truth and watch Robert murder his nephew, or lie and save him. "You're a Targaryen." Robb's voice was hollow. "You're not my brother, you're my cousin, and you have a claim to the Iron Throne." "The rightful claim," Jon said quietly. "If legitimacy matters, if bloodlines matter, I'm the heir to the 7 kingdoms. Rhaegar's son, the prince that was promised to Lyanna." Catelyn was weeping openly now. "I hated you. For 17 years I looked at you and saw proof of Ned's betrayal, and you were innocent. You were Lyanna's son, and I hated you for existing." "You didn't know," Jon said. "How could you?" "I should have trusted Ned, should have known he wouldn't." She couldn't finish. The guilt and grief were too much. Robb stood abruptly, paced to the window, stared out at the night. For long minutes he said nothing. Jon waited, his heart hammering. Everything depended on how Robb reacted to this revelation. The alliance they needed, the united front against both Lannisters and White Walkers, the future of the 7 kingdoms, it all hung on what happened in this room. Finally Robb turned back. "The Green Dream, your vision of the Red Wedding, that wasn't just about saving me, was it? You saw something bigger, something worse than the war between Stark and Lannister. The White Walkers, Jon confirmed. The army of the dead, the real enemy. I felt it in the vision, buried beneath the horror of the massacre. There's something coming from beyond the wall that makes all our human conflicts look like children fighting over toys. And you think you need to be king to fight it. I think the Seven Kingdoms need to be united under someone who understands the threat and has the legitimacy to rally everyone. Not a Lannister who doesn't believe in White Walkers. Not a divided realm with the North independent and the South hostile. We need unity. Robb came back to the table, sat down heavily. What are you proposing? An alliance. You're the king in the North. Your lords have proclaimed you, fought for you, bled for you. I won't ask you to give that up. The North stays independent under your rule. But the South, Jon leaned forward, help me take the Iron Throne. Together we have the strength to defeat the Lannisters. I claim the South, you keep the North. Two kingdoms working together instead of fighting each other. And when the White Walkers come, we face them united. Two kings, Catelyn said softly. The realm hasn't seen that since before Aegon's conquest. The realm has never faced the Long Night either, Jon countered. Not in living memory. The rules have to change. Robb studied Jon's face for a long moment. You're asking me to help you claim a throne I have no use for. To fight battles for southern lords who've never done anything for the North. To spend northern lives putting a Targaryen back in power. I'm asking you to help me save the realm. All of it. North and South together. Jon's voice was intense. And I'm offering you something in return. The North's independence. Recognized and guaranteed. No more kneeling to southern kings. No more demands for troops and taxes. The North rules itself. And I'll defend that right with everything I have. Why should I trust a Targaryen? Your grandfather burned mine alive. Your father kidnapped our aunt. Rhaegar didn't kidnap Lyanna. They loved each other. They married, and I'm as much Stark as Targaryen. Jon gestured to Ghost. I have a direwolf. I was raised at Winterfell. I have northern values, northern loyalties. The dragon blood runs in my veins, yes, but so does the wolf blood. I'm both. Robb looked at his mother. Catelyn's face was still streaked with tears, but her expression was thoughtful. Jon saved your life, she said quietly. He rode 1,000 miles, killed 2 horses, crossed the neck on foot while running a fever, all to warn you about the Red Wedding. He broke his vows, became a deserter, risked everything, not for power or glory, to save his family. I'm still your family, Jon said to Robb. Cousin instead of brother, but family nonetheless. That hasn't changed. Robb was quiet for a long time. Then, if we do this, if we march south together, what happens to you in the Night's Watch? You're still a deserter. They'll want your head. I'll deal with the Watch. Send them resources, men, gold. Enough that they'll accept my absence as the price of survival. Jon's voice was firm. And if they don't, I'll deal with that too. The Watch exists to protect the realm from what lies beyond the wall. I'm doing exactly that, just from a different position. You'll need to be legitimized, Catelyn said. Right now you're still Jon Snow in the eyes of the law. A bastard has no claim to anything. I can legitimize him, Robb said slowly. As king in the North, I have that power over Northmen. I can make him Jon Stark. And later, when we reveal his parentage to the realm, he becomes Jon Targaryen, Catelyn finished. Or Jon Stark Targaryen, both at once. Jon felt something loosen in his chest. They were actually considering it, not just considering. Planning. Working through the practicalities. There's one more thing, Robb said. If we're going to do this, if we're going to march on King's Landing together, the men need to understand why. Need to believe in it. That means you tell them who you are. Publicly. No more secrets. The lords won't like it, Jon warned. A Targaryen claimant supported by the North, some will see it as madness. Some will see it as justice, Catelyn said. Rhaegar's son, raised by Ned Stark, coming to claim what's his by right. With the North's backing, with Robb's endorsement, with proof of your parentage, they'll follow you. Not all of them, but enough. Then we have an alliance. You help me secure the Riverlands and finish this war. I help you take the Iron Throne. The North stays independent. You rule the South. And together we prepare for the real enemy. Jon took his hand. They gripped forearms in the northern way, the gesture of warriors swearing pacts. Together, Jon agreed. Catelyn came around the table and did something Jon had never expected in 17 years. She pulled him into an embrace. I'm sorry, she whispered. for every cold word, every hard look, every moment I made you feel unwanted. You deserved better. You deserved to be loved." Jon's throat tightened. "You didn't know. I should have trusted Ned. Should have known there was more to the story." She pulled back, held his shoulders, looked into his eyes. "You're Lyanna's son, my husband's nephew, family, and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for how I treated you." The next morning, Robb assembled the northern army in the fields outside the Twins. Every lord, every knight, every soldier who could be spared from securing the castles gathered to hear their king speak. Word had spread that something momentous was about to happen, and the men were restless with anticipation. Jon stood beside Robb on a raised platform. Ghost sat at his feet. The Crannog men were arrayed behind them, small figures with sharp eyes watching everything. Robb raised his hand for silence. The army quieted. "Yesterday we won a great victory," Robb called out, his voice carrying across the field. "The Freys and Boltons planned to murder us under the sacred laws of guest right. They conspired with Tywin Lannister to end our rebellion with treachery instead of facing us in honest battle. And we turned their trap against them. They'd all heard the story by now, how Jon Snow had warned them, how the Red Wedding had been prevented, how the Freys had been slaughtered in their own hall. But we didn't win this victory alone," Robb continued. "We won because one man rode 1,000 miles to warn us. One man broke his vows, deserted the Night's Watch, risked everything to save his king. One man who the laws say is a bastard and a deserter, but who I say is a hero." Jon felt the weight of thousands of eyes on him. Jon Snow came to me with impossible knowledge, a green dream showing him the future. And he didn't just tell me about the Red Wedding, he told me about the real threat. The enemy beyond the wall, the White Walkers and their army of the dead, the long night that's coming whether we're ready or not. The cheering had died down. Now there was confusion, uncertainty. White Walkers were children's stories, old Nan's tales to frighten children. "I know some of you think the White Walkers are myths," Robb said. "I thought so too, but Jon has seen them, fought them, and his green dream showed him something worse than any war between men. It showed him winter coming, and the dead coming with it." He paused, let that sink in, then continued. "To fight that threat, the Seven Kingdoms need to be united, not divided between North and South, Stark and Lannister, independence and loyalty, united under leaders who understand what's coming and have the strength to prepare." Robb turned to Jon. "Jon Snow, step forward." Jon did, his heart pounding. "Kneel." Robb drew his sword. "Jon Snow, you came to me a bastard and a deserter. You warned me of treason. You saved my life and the lives of every man here. You've proven your loyalty, your courage, and your worth beyond any doubt." The sword touched Jon's right shoulder, then his left. "I, Robb Stark, King in the North, hereby legitimize you as Jon Stark. You are no longer a bastard. You are my brother in name as you've always been in my heart. You have all the rights and privileges of a true-born son of Eddard Stark. Rise, Jon Stark." Jon stood. The army was cheering again, but he could see confusion on many faces. Why legitimize a deserter? Why give a bastard, even a heroic one, the Stark name? Robb wasn't done. He raised his hand for silence again. "But Jon Stark is not the whole truth. There's more you need to know. Jon, tell them who you really are." Jon took a deep breath and stepped to the front of the platform. "My mother was not a tavern wench," Jon said, his voice projecting across the field. "My mother was Lyanna Stark, sister to Eddard Stark, daughter of Rickard Stark. She died giving birth to me at the Tower of Joy in Dorne 17 years ago." Gasps rippled through the army. Lyanna Stark, the woman Robert's rebellion had been fought over. The Stark girl kidnapped by a Targaryen prince. And my father was Rhaegar Targaryen, Prince of Dragonstone, heir to the Iron Throne. They married in secret. They loved each other. When I was born, my father was already dead, killed by Robert Baratheon at the Trident. My mother died in childbirth, and Eddard Stark made a choice: tell the truth and watch Robert murder his infant nephew, or lie and save him. Jon pulled out the silver harp, held it high so the army could see. This was my father's harp, Rhaegar Targaryen's. My mother kept it. Howland Reed has kept it safe all these years, along with letters from Ned Stark confirming the truth. I am Jon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, with a claim to the Iron Throne that supersedes anyone currently sitting it. The silence was absolute. Thousands of men staring at him in shock. Then the great Jon's voice boomed out, "The King in the South!" Other voices joined in. Not all of them. Jon could see lords muttering among themselves, uncertain, suspicious. But enough voices, enough support. The dragon and the wolf. Jon Targaryen. Robb raised his hands again. I have made an alliance with Jon Targaryen. The North remains independent under my rule. The South will be his when we take it from the Lannisters. 2 kingdoms, working together instead of fighting each other. 2 kings with one purpose, to defeat our enemies and prepare for the long night. He broke his vows. Jon left the wall to save his king's life, Robb called back. He deserted to prevent my murder. I call that loyalty, not cowardice. And as king in the North, I pardon him. The Night's Watch will receive compensation. Men, gold, supplies, everything they need to hold the wall. But Jon is mine now. He's the North's, and soon he'll be the South's too. The great Jon stepped forward, drew his sword, and knelt. I pledge my sword to Jon Targaryen. I'll follow him to King's Landing and beyond. The dragon and the wolf. Other lords began kneeling. The Blackfish. Mage Mormont. One by one, the northern lords pledged their support. Not all of them. Rickard Karstark looked troubled. Some of the smaller houses hesitant. But the major powers were backing the alliance. The common soldiers, seeing their lords kneel, began kneeling too. Within minutes, the entire northern army was on its knees before Robb and Jon. 2 kings, the wolf and the dragon. An alliance that would reshape Westeros. That night, as the army celebrated their survival and their new purpose, Jon found himself alone on the battlements of the Twins. Ghost pressed against his leg. Below, campfires stretched to the horizon. 40,000 men preparing to march south. Footsteps behind him. Catelyn joined him at the wall. You're thinking about Ned, she said. He carried this secret for 17 years. Never told anyone except Howland. Lived with everyone thinking he betrayed his marriage vows. Let you hate him. Let me grow up ashamed. Jon's voice was rough. I don't know if I could have done that. He loved his sister very much, and he loved you. Catelyn looked out at the army. When he comes north again, when we've won and this is all over, you can tell him thank you. Tell him you understand why he did it. If we survive, the Green Dreams showed Jojen that much. She paused. There's something you should know. A raven came from Winterfell, from Maester Luwin. Bran has woken from his coma. Jon's heart leaped. He's alive? He's all right? He's alive. But Luwin says Bran is having strange dreams. Dreams where he sees through the eyes of his direwolf. Dreams of things far away. Catelyn met Jon's eyes. Your brother, your cousin, might be a Greenseer too. The old magic runs strong in this generation. Then he'll understand when I tell him about the White Walkers, about what's coming. Jon felt a weight lift slightly. Bran alive, the little brother he'd said goodbye to that first day, when everything had seemed so simple. The days that followed were filled with preparation. Robb sent ravens to every northern house, calling for reinforcements. The Riverlands lords were contacted, those who'd stayed loyal to Edmure and the Tullys. The Twins were garrisoned with northern forces. Walder Frey's surviving children were given a choice: swear loyalty to the North or face execution for their father's treachery. Most chose loyalty. A few chose defiance and died for it. The army swelled. 40,000 men became 50,000, then 60,000. The largest force the North had fielded in generations. And at its head rode 2 kings, Robb Stark in his crown of bronze and iron, Jon Targaryen wearing no crown yet but commanding loyalty nonetheless. They prepared to march south, toward King's Landing, toward the war that would decide the fate of the 7 kingdoms. But first, they sent a message. The wooden crate arrived at King's Landing 3 weeks after the Twins. Inside, preserved in tar, were the heads of Walder Frey and Roose Bolton. A letter accompanied them, written in Robb's hand but bearing Jon's words. Lord Tywin Lannister, your plan failed. Your allies are dead. The North and the Riverlands stand united against you. And now we are joined by another, Jon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, rightful heir to the Iron Throne. We are coming south. We are coming with 60,000 men. We are coming to take what is ours by right of blood and conquest. You have stolen the throne through murder and treachery. You have broken the realm with your ambition. Your time is ending. Bend the knee or face destruction. Robb Stark, king in the North. Jon Targaryen, king by right. In King's Landing, Tywin Lannister read the message with his characteristic composure. He examined the heads, called a council meeting, Joffrey screamed and raged. Cersei wept. But Tywin simply began planning. A Targaryen heir, he said quietly to his war council, backed by the North. Interesting. This changes the calculation. We should kill them all. Joffrey shrieked. I'll have their heads. You'll be quiet, Tywin said coldly. His grandson subsided into sullen silence. We're facing the largest northern army in history, led by competent commanders with a legitimate claimant to challenge Joffrey's rule. This requires strategy, not tantrums. What do we do? Cersei asked. Tywin looked at the map of Westeros spread before him. We prepare for war, real war. Call in every bannerman, every sword the Westerlands can muster. Reach out to the Reach, to the Stormlands, to anyone who fears what a Targaryen restoration might mean. And we pray we have enough time to meet them in the field before they reach the gates of King's Landing. They moved fast for such a large force, covering 20 miles a day, sweeping aside the few Lannister patrols foolish enough to oppose them. Word spread ahead of them. The wolf and the dragon were coming. 2 kings marching together, a Targaryen heir backed by northern steel. Some towns opened their gates and welcomed them. Others barred their doors and waited nervously. A few tried to resist and were taken by storm. Jon gave strict orders: no raping, no unnecessary killing, no burning. They were coming to liberate the realm, not destroy it. The soldiers mostly obeyed. Jon rode at the front with Robb, Ghost, and Grey Wind running ahead. The 2 direwolves had bonded, playing and hunting together, 2 apex predators accepting each other as pack. I've been thinking, Robb said one evening as they made camp, about what happens after we take King's Landing, about the White Walkers. What about them? You've seen them, fought them. How do we kill them? How does an army fight the dead? Jon had been dreading this question. The Night's Watch has ancient records. Dragonglass, obsidian can kill them. Valyrian steel too. But regular weapons just shatter against them. And every man they kill joins their army. Every corpse rises to fight for them. Lots of it. There's deposits on Dragonstone. The island is volcanic. If we take King's Landing, we can mine Dragonstone, arm the army with dragonglass weapons. Jon's mind was working through the logistics. We'll need smiths who can work it, though. It's not like regular steel. We'll find them. Robb's voice was firm. We didn't survive the Red Wedding just to die to ice demons. We'll find a way. They marched for 6 weeks, covering nearly 800 miles. Through the Riverlands, through the Crownlands. Steadily south toward the capital. Lannister scouts tracked them but didn't engage. Tywin was gathering his forces at King's Landing, preparing for a siege or a decisive battle. When they were 50 miles from the capital, a rider approached under a flag of truce. He wore Lannister red and gold, carried a sealed letter. From Lord Tywin Lannister, the messenger said, handing the letter to Robb. He wishes to negotiate. Robb broke the seal, read, his expression hardening. He passed the letter to Jon. King Robb, Jon Targaryen, I propose a meeting. Tomorrow at midday, at a location of your choosing, under flag of truce, you, me, and whatever advisors we each wish to bring. Let us discuss terms before more blood is shed. I am a practical man. Perhaps we can find a practical solution. Tywin Lannister, Hand of the King. It's a trap, the great Jon growled when Jon read the letter aloud to the War Council. Maybe, Jon said, but maybe not. Tywin knows he's in a bad position. His conspiracy failed, his allies are dead, he's facing 60,000 men with a Targaryen claimant. Negotiation might actually be in his interest, or he's buying time for reinforcements from the Reach, the Blackfish said. Robb looked at Jon. What do you think? I think we meet him, but carefully. Heavy guard, neutral ground, and we don't agree to anything that doesn't end with you keeping the North and me taking the Iron Throne. They chose a field halfway between the armies. The next day at midday, the 2 sides met. Tywin Lannister came with 5 men. All guards, no family. He sat his horse like he owned the world, his green eyes calculating as always. At 67, he was still formidable, still commanding. Robb and Jon came with the Great Jon, the Blackfish, Catelyn, and 20 northern soldiers as protection. The 2 groups faced each other across 50 feet of open ground. King Robb, Tywin said. His voice was measured, showing no fear or deference. Jon Targaryen, you've come a long way. We're here to take what's ours, Jon said. The throne you stole when you sacked King's Landing, the throne that belongs to House Targaryen by right. An interesting concept. Your father kidnapped Lyanna Stark and started a war that killed thousands. His father burned men alive. His family ruled through fear and dragons. You speak of right as if the Targaryens have any moral authority. I'm not my grandfather. I'm not even entirely my father. I'm Stark as much as Targaryen. Jon met Tywin's eyes. And I'm offering you something your family has never had. Mercy. Bend the knee. Acknowledge my claim. Help me unite the realm. In return, I'll let House Lannister survive. Casterly Rock stays yours. Your grandchildren live. You keep your wealth and your lands. And in return, I give you the Iron Throne and acknowledge you as king. Yes. Tywin was quiet for a moment. And if I refuse, your family dies with everyone else. Jon's voice was cold. I don't want that. I'd rather have your support. But I'll do what's necessary. You're more ruthless than I expected from Ned Stark's boy. Ned Stark wasn't my father, and I've learned that sometimes ruthlessness is the only thing that works. Tywin turned his gaze to Robb. And you, King in the North? What's your price in all this? The North's independence. Recognized and guaranteed. No more kneeling to Southern kings. No more demands for troops and taxes. The North rules itself, and Jon defends that right. 2 kingdoms. You're proposing to split the 7 kingdoms permanently. They've been split since you murdered Rhaegar's children and placed a bastard on the throne, Robb said flatly. We're just making it official. Jon could almost see the calculations running behind those cold green eyes, weighing odds, assessing strengths, looking for leverage. I need time to consider, Tywin finally said. You have until sunset tomorrow, Jon said. After that, we march on King's Landing, with or without your cooperation. Tywin inclined his head slightly. Then I will give you my answer tomorrow. His guards followed. The great Jon spat after them. He's planning something that old lion doesn't surrender. Maybe not, Jon said. But we gave him the option. That matters. The army prepared for battle, just in case. Siege equipment was readied. Battle formations planned. If Tywin refused, they would assault the walls at dawn the day after tomorrow. The next afternoon, as the sun descended toward the horizon, a rider came from King's Landing. Not Tywin, someone else. The imp rode a specially modified horse, his stunted legs barely reaching the stirrups. He approached the northern camp under a white flag, alone. I wish to speak with Jon Targaryen, Tyrion called out. They brought him to Robb's command tent. Tyrion dismounted awkwardly, straightened his clothes, and looked up at Jon with those mismatched eyes. So you're Rhaegar's son. I can see it now. The Stark features mixed with something else. You have his hair, his build. Tyrion's voice was thoughtful. My father is considering your offer, but he sent me to ask a question first. What question? What happens to my family if he bends the knee? Be specific. Does my sister live? Her children? My brother Jaime? Jon exchanged a glance with Robb, then answered, Cersei lives but loses all power. Her children are removed from succession and sent somewhere far from King's Landing. Maybe the Westerlands, maybe across the narrow sea. They live, but they never threaten the throne again. Jaime Lannister keeps his position in the Kingsguard if he swears loyalty. Your father lives and keeps Casterly Rock. You. Jon paused. You're the smartest, Lannister. I'd find a use for you, master of coin maybe. Or hand, if you prove loyal. Tyrion's eyebrows rose. You'd make a Lannister your hand? Your name matters less than your abilities? And if my father refuses your offer, then everyone dies when we storm the walls. Cersei, her children, Tywin, you, all of you. Because I won't leave Lannister threats alive to stab me in the back later. Jon's voice was steady. I'm offering mercy once. Only once. Then he smiled slightly. You know, you might actually succeed. Most Targaryen claimants are mad or incompetent. You seem to be neither. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'll advise my father to accept. The Lannister line survives, keeps our ancestral seat, and serves a new king. That's better than extinction. Will he listen? Tywin Lannister always does what's practical. And right now, bending the knee is more practical than dying. Tyrion mounted his horse. You'll have your answer by sunset. The sun touched the horizon. The entire northern army stood ready, watching the gates of King's Landing. Then the gates opened. A rider emerged carrying a white banner. Behind him, a column of Lannister soldiers, thousands of them, marching out of the city without weapons drawn. And at the front, riding a magnificent black destrier, came Tywin Lannister. He rode to the midpoint between the armies, dismounted. knelt in the dirt. I, Tywin Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, acknowledge Jon Targaryen as the rightful king of the Six Kingdoms. His voice carried across the field. House Lannister bends the knee. Behind him, the Lannister soldiers knelt. Thousands of men in red and gold, kneeling before a Targaryen heir backed by northern steel. Jon dismounted and approached Tywin. Robb came with him. Rise, Lord Tywin. Tywin stood. His face was composed, showing no emotion, but Jon could see the calculation in his eyes. This wasn't surrender born of defeat. It was a strategic repositioning. Tywin would serve, but he'd be watching for opportunities. The terms we discussed, Jon said. You agree to all of them? I agree. The North's independence under King Robb. Your claim to the southern kingdoms, my family's survival in exchange for loyalty. Tywin's voice was flat. And I will serve as your advisor if you wish it. I know how to run kingdoms, how to manage lords, how to keep the realm stable. I'll consider it, Jon said. First, we need to see the transition of power. Joffrey Baratheon, or whatever his real name is, needs to step down. He will. I'll ensure it. They marched into King's Landing that evening, 60,000 Northerners and Riverlanders filing through the gates, taking control of the city that had been the seat of power for 300 years. The small folk watched nervously, remembering when Tywin had sacked the city during Robert's rebellion. But Jon's orders were strict. No looting, no raping, no burning. This was a transition of power, not a conquest. In the throne room, Joffrey Baratheon sat the Iron Throne with a crown on his golden head. He was 13 years old, beautiful and cruel, shaking with rage and fear. Jon and Robb entered the throne room side by side. Ghost and Grey Wind walked with them. The King's Guard stood uncertain, not knowing whether to defend Joffrey or stand down. Joffrey Baratheon, Jon said, his voice echoing in the great hall. You are not Robert's son. You are the product of incest between Cersei and Jaime Lannister. You have no claim to this throne. You're lying. I'm the king, the true king, Joffrey's voice cracked. Your grandfather has already bent the knee to me, Jon continued. House Lannister acknowledges my claim. You have two choices, step down peacefully and live, or resist and die. Joffrey looked to the King's Guard. Jaime Lannister stood among them, his face troubled. The others looked uncertain. I'm the king, Joffrey whimpered. Tywin entered the throne room, walked up the steps to where his grandson sat, removed the crown from Joffrey's head with his own hands. You were never a king, Tywin said coldly. You were a placeholder, and your time is over. He handed the crown to Jon. Jon stood before the Iron Throne, the twisted mass of swords that Aegon the Conqueror had forged from the weapons of his defeated enemies. The seat that had held Targaryen kings for 300 years, then Baratheon kings for 17. Now it would hold a Targaryen again, but Jon didn't sit. Not yet. I claim this throne by right of blood, Jon said to the assembled lords in the hall. By right of conquest, by right of justice. I am Jon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, and I will rule the Six Kingdoms justly and well. The North remains independent under King Robb Stark. The rest of you will bend the knee or face the consequences. One by one, the southern lords knelt, some eagerly, some reluctantly, but they knelt. The transition was complete. Only then did Jon sit the Iron Throne, the swords pressed against his back, a reminder that power came from conquest, from blood, from violence. But Jon swore to himself that he would use that power differently, would rule differently, would prepare the realm for the real threat that was coming. The coronation was held a week later, simple by royal standards, but powerful nonetheless. Jon wore a crown forged from iron and dragon glass, a symbol of the North and the coming threat. Robb stood beside him as an equal, not a subject. Two kings crowned on the same day. In the audience stood Catelyn, the Great Jon, the Blackfish, Tyrion Lannister, and hundreds of lords from across the realm. And beyond the Red Keep's walls, the small folk celebrated. A new king, a new beginning. Hope that maybe the wars would end. Jon's first act as king was to send massive resources to the Night's Watch. Gold, food, dragon glass weapons, 5,000 men. With it went a letter, Lord Commander, I am Jon Targaryen, formerly Jon Snow. I have claimed the Iron Throne. I am now your king. I send you these resources not as payment for my desertion, but as fulfillment of the Watch's purpose. The real war is coming. The White Walkers are real. And when they come, the realm will be ready. I will visit the Wall within the year to discuss our preparations. Until then, use what I've sent to strengthen your defenses. Jon Targaryen, king of the Six Kingdoms. His second act was to order expeditions to Dragonstone, mine every deposit of dragon glass, forge weapons by the thousand, prepare for the long night. His third act was to legitimize every one of Robert's bastards and give them positions. Gendry became a lord with lands in the Stormlands. Maya Stone was given a keep in the Vale. Edric Storm was brought to court. They were his cousins, in a way, Robert's children, and Robert had been raised by Jon Arryn alongside Ned. They were family. A month after the coronation, Jon stood on the battlements of the Red Keep with Robb, looking north toward where the wall stood invisible beyond the horizon. "Winter is coming," Robb said quietly. "Yes, but this time we'll be ready." Jon's hand rested on Longclaw's hilt. "The watch is reinforced. Dragonglass weapons are being forged. The realm is united under one purpose instead of tearing itself apart. We have time to prepare. The White Walkers move slowly, but they're coming." Jon looked at his cousin, his brother in all but blood. "We saved each other at the Twins. Now we have to save the realm. We will. The wolf and the dragon together, just like we planned. Far to the north, beyond the wall in the frozen lands where the dead walked, two blue eyes opened in the darkness. The Night King stood among his army of whites, patient and ancient, watching the realm of men prepare. Let them prepare. Let them gather their armies, forge their weapons, unite their kingdoms. Winter was coming, and winter always won. But for the first time in 8,000 years, the realm of men had a chance. Not a certainty, not a guarantee, just a chance. And Jon Targaryen, the Wolf Dragon King, was determined to make that chance enough. The story of how the Red Wedding was prevented would be told for generations. How Jon Snow rode 1,000 miles to save his brother. How the trap was turned. How two kings united where one would have fallen. But that was just the beginning. The real story, the story of the long night, of the battle between the living and the dead, of whether the realm could survive the winter, that story was just starting. And Jon Targaryen, who had seen the future and changed it once, swore he would change it again. Whatever it took, whatever the cost, the realm would survive. The dawn would come. He had seen the darkness. He had felt it. And he would not let it win. End. Epilogue, The Raven's Massage. 3 months after Jon's coronation, a raven arrived from the wall. Lord Commander Jorah Mormont's hand, though Mormont was dead, killed in a mutiny that Jon's resources and reinforcements had helped quell. The message was brief: Your Grace. The White Walkers have been sighted by our rangers. 3 separate sightings in the past month. They're coming south. The wall still stands, we're ready. But we need you to be ready too. The long night is beginning. Alliser Thorne, acting Lord Commander. Jon read the message twice, then called his council. Robb, Tyrion, the Great Jon, Catelyn, the Blackfish. It's starting, Jon said simply. The White Walkers are coming. We have maybe a year before they reach the wall in force, maybe less. Then we use that year, Tyrion said. Every dragonglass weapon we can forge, every soldier we can train, every preparation we can make. I'm marching north, Robb said immediately, taking the northern army to reinforce the wall. And I'm coming with you, Jon said. Not with the whole southern army. We need forces to hold the realm. But with 10,000 men and every dragonglass blade we've made. Catelyn spoke quietly. This is what you saw in the Green Dream, isn't it? The real threat. The reason you changed everything. Yes, the Red Wedding was just the first step. This is why it mattered. Jon stood, looking at each of them. We stopped one apocalypse. Now we face another. But this time, the realm is united. The kingdoms are at peace. We have the resources and the knowledge to fight. Can we win? The Great Jon asked bluntly. Jon thought about the vision, about the cold blue eyes, about the army of the dead that could swell with every victory, that couldn't be killed by normal means. That brought eternal winter with them. I don't know, he said honestly, but we're going to try. And if we fail, it won't be because we didn't fight with everything we had. They began preparations immediately, the largest mobilization in Westerosi history. Not to fight each other this time, not to settle scores or claim thrones, to fight for survival, for humanity, for the dawn. Jon Targaryen, the bastard king, the wolf dragon had seen the future and changed it once. Now he would do it again, or die trying. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.